One. Hello, my name is Crystal Petry, and you are watching another episode of the Crystal Petry Podcast, Season 3. Leadership isn't just about command, it's about connection. Today's guest brings a rare perspective, transitioning from the Marines, where emotional restraint is survival, to leadership space that demands self-awareness, empathy, and emotional intelligence. This conversation challenges what strength really looks like when the uniform comes off and real leadership begins. So, welcome to the podcast, Rick. How are you?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm doing really well. Thank you. This is awesome.
Excellent, excellent. So, where in the world are you, Rick?
Yes, so I am in South Central Pennsylvania, a town called Mechanicsburg, just outside of the capital of Harrisburg.
Okay, I've never heard of a South Central Pennsylvania, so I, I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about your unique perspective in this world of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. How did the Marines shape your understanding of leadership?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what most people think about the military is the leadership. They're known for leadership, decentralized command and all those things that come from the military. And while I was in, that was the biggest thing, was just that bias for action. We have to get a job done. Leadership is about accomplishing that mission. Leadership may mean you have to run through brick walls. You have to figure out how to get the job done. And that was my view of leadership from the Marine Corps. It's definitely evolved since then. But as my introduction to leadership, it was really just how can you get the mission complete while also taking care of your people, but understanding that at the end of the day, those are going to be competing priorities. Mission comes first. So very much like you said, that command and control. I'm the leader and I'm going to kind of push us across the finish line because that's what I'm here to do, is be the person that's out in front, moving everyone forward. So it was a very hands-on, hard approach to leadership from the Marine Corps.
Rick, why did you select the Marine Corps, and how long were you enlisted?
Yeah, so I was in for 4 years. I was in from 2014 to 2018. And for me, joining was a way to get some life experience. So I did good in high school, but I wasn't really interested in college. I also didn't have the financial means to go to college without incurring debt. And I was like, you know what? The Marine Corps seems like 4 years of life experience, and it's going to kind of set me up for the next stage of my life. Since I've been able to go to college after the Marine Corps, I'm very happy I chose to do it that way. But for me, joining was a way to accumulate life experience, accumulate some wisdom, learn from other people. And inadvertently, it broadened my perspectives in a way that I was not expecting. I was definitely not going in, thinking my worldview would be rocked. But it was just meeting people from all over the United States, meeting people that got their citizenship through the Marine Corps that were from other countries. It was just, a very big mixing pool of different people. And I actually learned a lot more about just people in general, and I was not expecting that. But my goal of life experience, I definitely got a lot of it while I was in.
Excellent, excellent. I literally just learned maybe a month ago, Rick, that, and this is a pivot, then we'll get back to our podcast, that you can get your citizenship through the military. Mm-hmm. I did not know that. And I feel like they don't advertise that enough.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I had multiple people that joined with a green card. And then after boot camp, we actually had a ceremony where they got, I think, naturalized. I'm not sure what the official term is, but they had a ceremony where they become citizens. So it was actually pretty cool to see. And the people were really happy and excited. And some of them were like, yeah, I want to be a citizen. And this is the easiest path for me to become a citizen. As it should be, right? You're willing to risk your life for this country. Right. You should absolutely get the citizenship.
Yes, so, I agree.
It was really cool, but I didn't know that either until I had actually joined. So I don't think a lot of people know that's an avenue you can take.
Yes. Okay, so back to the podcast. So as you have discussed, and probably a lot of people know, leadership in the military, it's rigid, it's hard, it's tough, it's kind of my way or the highway.
Mhm.
How did that affect you personally?
Yeah, honestly, with my personality, I leaned into it. It led me into some bad habits, my first job out of the Marine Corps. But I really did enjoy that structure. It was really the freedom and autonomy I had as a, 21-year-old leader of a team of 8. I had a lot of freedom day to day in terms of how I would lead them, how I would train them, what our schedule looked like. And I really kind of lead into that, like hard training, like this is the job.
Mhm.
And when I got out, I thought that's what leadership was until I started working in a warehouse with civilians underneath of me. And I started to kind of see that there's a lot more to it than that. So I really had to do a big change. But while I was in, I think I leaned into it a lot and I was able to be successful while I was in. But then it forced me to unlearn a lot of bad habits along the way.
Now, Rick, you stated that once you got out of the Marines, that you had some bad choices because of the leadership style that they have. Can
Mhm.
you divulge one or two of those bad choices that you feel like was because of the leadership in the Marines?
Yeah. So I got out of the Marine Corps in 2018. Like I said, I got out in October and wanted to start working right away. So I got a job as a warehouse and I was a supervisor on second shift. So 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. I'm basically on my own at 5 p.m., right? The general manager, the bosses, they all leave. It's me and maybe 15 to 20 people. Big warehouse, you're loading tractor trailers full of pallets. Very, typical warehouse type work. Everyone's on a forklift. So it was the holiday season, which means for the world of logistics, it's very busy. It's the busy season. It's the shopping season. So as is typical in a warehouse environment, my boss said, hey, we're going to overtime, mandatory overtime. Instead of 8 hours a day, everyone's working 10 hours a day. You can show up 2 hours early or you can stay 2 hours late, but you have to get in those hours.
Mm-hmm.
So he tells me this and I'm like, okay, no big deal. I can make that happen. So I go out and I announce it to the team. And there were a lot of concerns and people said, well, hey, last year I got, an exception because of this reason. Hey, I'm a part-time employee. This doesn't apply to me. And my mind is, well, my boss told me to get this done. So like, that's what we're going to do. And I just kind of dropped the hammer and I was like, you have to work it. Otherwise, you're going to get disciplinary action. You get a point, you get attendance points. It can lead to termination, going down that policy rabbit hole. And almost had a little bit of a mutiny. What actually ended up happening was my boss found out about it because everyone had heard about it.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation and that's when he kind of helped me understand, what we can do to work with people, how we can accommodate them other ways. So like one person wanted to work on their day off instead of working overtime. Other people were willing to work different shifts. And I just wasn't, I was so focused on, hey, he said overtime, like this is what we're doing, that I wasn't willing to hear someone's perspective, or I wasn't willing to understand that, well, I work second shift because of childcare. I can't come in 2 hours early. I
Mm.
can't stay 2 hours late. Like this doesn't work. And trying to realize, okay, I need this employee all year. So I have to treat them with respect around the holidays, right? I can't abuse them around the holidays and then expect them to show up in March happy and excited and, motivated to work. So it was kind of that, big picture for me where it's like, whoa, in the Marine Corps it was just mission focused, very
Mm-hmm.
short term. But this is the longevity. Like they can't quit in the Marine Corps. I can be as mean, ruthless as I
Oh, yeah,
want. They
it's
can't
true.
leave. They're stuck with me. That's not the case. So you have to be able to meet your employees where they're at and learn from them. So that was like a big smack in the face the first few months. And like I said, I was leaning into the Marine Corps style. So like, wasn't even phasing me. I wasn't even concerned. And then my boss had to talk to me and was like, hey, this is going to be a problem. And that was kind of the start of where I was like, okay, there's something to this transition piece that people talk about. It's not a one-to-one correlation.
Mhm. Do you think that was your first experience where you became aware of your emotional blind spot?
Definitely, it was the first time that I realized I had to work on it.
Mm-hmm.
There was earlier times in my life, definitely in childhood and sports, where ego was a big problem, and it led to some anger, mainly when I would do bad, right? You get angry at yourself, but it's really your ego. You're embarrassed. You did poorly. You look bad and you're ashamed of that, essentially. So I had always dealt with that, but in the Marine Corps, ego sometimes helps you. It can actually be a benefit, like I was mentioning. So I leaned into it. So I always knew, but I just thought that's good leaders have an ego, right? You know, you look at the successful CEOs, they're charismatic, they're these big personalities, ego's a part of it. And that was kind of the moment where I was like, well, maybe it's not a part of it. Maybe there is another way. So let me start learning from people that have led in the civilian world, because my first introduction to leadership was in the Marine Corps. So let me learn from these people, take a step back. I actually ended up shadowing. So I would come in on first shift at noon, 3 hours before my shift started, to shadow the first shift supervisor. And I learned a lot from him, where it was just like, okay, how can I model this? So that was the first time where I was like, let's do something about this. Like, let's take action and see if there's another way, before I was kind of ignoring it. And I think that's what a lot of people do when it comes to those blind spots, especially on the emotional side. It's like, look, that's just how I am, right? That's just who I am. That's my personality. So I'm going to lean into it a little bit. And that's where I think people run into issues, when they don't take a step back and say, too much of something can also be bad, right? So let me maybe not lean into this skill as much. And that was the first time that I was like, okay, let's make a change. Let's take some action and see if we can improve and become a better leader.
Okay, so I want to throw out a little disclaimer here, Rick. We are not bashing the Marines. The Marines are amazing. The Marines are awesome. We absolutely need them here in the United States. And, you know, if they go abroad, they're needed there as well. So we are not bashing the Marines at all. We need them and we love them. Now, with that being said, I love the fact, Rick, and I just kind of followed your path here. I love the fact that you saw that something was wrong, then you acknowledge that, okay, I need to do something about this, and then you actually went out and did something about it. Did someone encourage you to do that, tell you to do that, or was that just something that, as that path progressed, you were like, okay, something's wrong here, I need to fix it, and then you fixed it?
Yeah, it was definitely a combination. Like I said, my boss sat down and talked to me, and that was kind of the first eye opener, where it was more of like, hey, I'm not going to let you run a shift by yourself if the team's going to mutiny, 2 weeks in. So that was kind of I'm letting you know there's a problem. He didn't necessarily get hands-on and say, hey, this is your problem. He just said, hey, like, you're going to have to figure it out. This isn't going to work. And at that time, there was another third shift supervisor who was actually on a performance improvement plan. He was also struggling. So I was like, okay, I want to try and correct it before it gets to that point.
Yes.
And that's when I was like, well, there are 3 supervisors. One of us is doing good, the first shift supervisor. So let me go talk to that person, because he had been in warehousing for 30 years, knew the industry. He knew a lot of the people on second shift even. So he was giving me tips. He's like, hey, this person, if you tell them mandatory overtime, they're going to complain. They're going to give you attitude. Talk to them about it 2 days after you announce it, and they'll tell you what shift they're going to take. They just like to complain, so don't worry about it. Other people, and he was like giving me all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is great. And I was like, well, how would I know this? And I'm like, I could probably talk to those people too, right? And then that it just all snowballed from there. And I started spending more time on the floor. So instead of being in my office looking at the computer, because I can see all the performance numbers on the system, I was like, why don't I just walk around and talk to people? Hey, what are you working on? How's it going? Introduce them to myself, because I also had to think back. I am 22 years old at this point, and some of the people were twice my age. I was leading second shift. Some of them was a second job. They were like, hey, I am 5 years from retirement. I'm doing this for 5 more years and I'm cashing out. And it's like, I have to build their respect. I don't even know how to drive a forklift. That's what my employees do. So I had to go out. I had to learn how to do the things from them. I had to say, hey, how do you change a forklift battery? Walk me through it. Show me how to do it. And that's when I started gaining their respect. And I looked back on it. I didn't know it then, but when I look back on it, I was like, you were really trying to understand their perspective. You were trying to be an empathetic leader. You were trying to see where they're coming from. You were showing them that you want to learn from them. You were showing them that you were humble. And a lot of those things, I didn't realize what I was doing necessarily until I started studying leadership when I was getting my doctorate, and I was like really into the theory. And I started to realize, okay, kind of stumbled into some good things. I had some good leaders. Like I mentioned, that first shift supervisor, there was another mentor, an ops manager who helped me out a ton. So I definitely was not just my own product. It was those people that kind of pushed me, but no one really knew the underlying reasons. And then once I started studying it, I was fascinated by it. And now it's like, okay, how do I give back? How do I help other leaders understand the systems, understand how they can build a better environment so employees are happy to be there?
Do you have your doctorate, Rick?
I do, yes. Sorry, it's just
You
like a
did
little
not
humble
tell me
brag. Let
that.
me throw that in there.
You did not tell me that. We're 15 minutes into this conversation and we talked before the podcast and you never said that you have your doctorate. I'm going to start referring to you as Dr. Rick for the rest of this podcast, Dr. Rick. Congratulations on that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, when you were shattering and the supervisors, like the first shift supervisors mentoring you, what would you say was the hardest part of emotional intelligence that you had to learn?
Yeah, it was the kind of like social awareness and relationship management aspect of things.
Mm-hmm.
Learning to interact with people in that environment is different than the Marine Corps environment. The people that you're reporting to may not, for some people, they're like, this is going to be weird. But like for me, leading women was a challenge because I was in the Marine Corps infantry. I didn't have women underneath of me. So just trying to relate with them and connect with them, that was something where I was like, you have to ask questions. Like I had learned that if someone had a topic in common with me, right? Sports, football, we would talk and I'd have chit chat, I'm talking about someone's new truck with them. And it's like, you're not willing to connect with people that are different or have different hobbies. And it was that was the moment for me where I was like, I don't do a really good job at like engaging or connecting with people, right? I'll talk at them or maybe I'll, give them answer a question, but I'm not trying to go out and build connections with all my employees. I was very like isolated. And I learned that because I'm shadowing this person around and he's talking with everybody. He's picking up like a 5-minute conversation. Every person we see, hey, how's the family? How's this kid? What's, and I'm just like, I've been here 3 weeks and I don't even know this person. Like I know nothing about them. Mm-hmm. So that was like the eye-opening one for me where it's like, organically, you're going to form relationships and stronger bonds, but I had never been intentional about that as a leader. I just figured it would happen organically through my daily interactions, but I didn't put much stock into being intentional about it. And clearly he was. And I was like, okay, if I can't strike up a 90-second conversation with any one of my employees about what's going on in their life or just any topic, that's probably an issue I have because I'm not connecting with them. So that was a big learning moment for me where it's just like, you have to build an individual relationship with each employee. And that means you have to take an interest. You have to ask questions. You have to be curious about someone's life. And that emotional intelligence skill was just, I was an introverted person. So I was like, that just wasn't there for me, asking questions and building genuine connections with someone because you want to learn about them and you want to know so that you can have that, connection.
How did you start the relationship and start the conversation with women when, as you stated, a lot of times you had nothing in common with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually kind of that approach where I said I wanted to learn from people. The first person I learned with was our scheduling clerk. And she had been there for like 20 years. So I just sat down and I was like, okay, let me just ask her about her journey here in this company. And she started talking about that. And then from there, I was like, okay, let me ask some questions. Oh, kids, what are the kids up to, right? Oh, you live here. How long have you lived here? How long have you worked in this building? And she had so much institutional knowledge that I learned so much about the company just from having those conversations. And then she would be willing to like chat with me about stuff. So she'd see something coming. She'd be like, hey, this happens every year. They're not going to warn you about it. But just so you know, we're going to get hit with this massive order that's going to come on this day. It happens every year. They say it doesn't. I'm just letting you know. And they were almost like looking out for me when that happened. So I started like, okay, let me just go out and just talk about work. I was like, that's the one thing I know we have in common.
True.
And then from there, it just kind of, trickled out. Someone's like, oh yeah, I'm a little tired today. Oh, why are you tired today? Oh, the kids had off school. Oh, do you watch the kids during the day? How old are they? And it just kind of goes from there. So I just was like, okay, let's chit chat about work, how you're
Yes.
feeling, how's it going, and ask questions. That was the biggest thing, is like asking questions. There's actually a great book called The Coaching Habit. It's fantastic for questions and like just trying to learn from people. So I took the easy road. I asked about work and then built the connection from there.
I wouldn't say it's the easy road. When it comes to emotional intelligence, and you're the doctor here, so, correct me if I'm wrong. When it comes to emotional intelligence, whatever you can find that commonality, that's what you should lean in on. That's what you should use to connect with other people, whether they're different from you or you guys have a lot of likeness and sameness.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely support that.
Okay, so as you are learning emotional intelligence, and I feel like learning emotional intelligence is a constant. I feel like you never know it all and you never have it all. So as you are learning emotional intelligence, Dr. Rick, how did that force you to confront your identity?
Yeah, something I think I've done a lot more work on recently, like the past 12 months. So some of it's still kind of in flux when it comes to identity, but that's the biggest thing. Like the last probably 3-4 years, I really got into self-awareness. Took a behavioral assessment called the Predictive Index. I am certified in it, but I love it. Fantastic tool. And I started learning more about how I'm naturally wired to behave. And for me, that was like, okay, this means that's my default. So if I want to behave differently, these are sort of the cues that I have to look for. In this situation, I want to behave differently. I know this is my default. And I started thinking more about like what those defaults are and even assumptions I made. So one of the big things I changed recently is like in terms of self-awareness is I'm going to assume positive intent out of my employees as like a core belief. So there are a lot of people, employees struggling, they're not doing so well, and they say, well, they're lazy. They're not giving 100% effort. When you say that as a leader, you basically said, that's not my fault. That's their attitude. That's them. They're a lazy person. They're not giving effort. But if you flip it, you're like, you know what? They are giving their best effort. Maybe I didn't give them a clear task. Maybe I didn't train them well enough. Maybe they're struggling today and I haven't checked in on them. And you start to put the ownership back on you. And that's sort of one of the things as I think about that identity, it's starting to kind of shape how you want to show up as a leader. And how I think recently I've been more thinking about how fluid that is, and how that identity sometimes shifts depending on the person or the project. And I've tried to take the approach where as a leader, really curiosity and seeking to understand, that is more of the identity that I've been trying to take on, which means everything else is fluid. There's always going to be another side of the story. There's always going to be context you don't have. And my default has been more of, I'm going to lean into that as my identity, as, someone, I don't know where this quote came from. I think it's in our company, but get curious before you get furious, right?
Oh, I love that.
That sort of mindset is really what I've kind of shaped my identity to now. And that means you have to be willing to say, hey, the approach that worked 6 times, let me rethink it before I do it. And I will say that's a fine line between wanting to gather more data, get more information, and needing to make a decision. So definitely you have to balance that too. But just trying to become a more empathetic leader is, I think, really important. But at the end of the day, like your leadership identity is really all about your self-awareness and knowing who you are, because you're going to have a default style. You could lean into that default style, but odds are you're missing some blind spots because it's your default. You're so comfortable with it. You're so close to it. So to me, self-awareness is about saying, how do I rethink that identity that I have as a leader? And what could give me better results? What could be different? What are some blind spots? But I also like what you said about like the EQ journey. Like it's constant. I think that's the same about your identity. It's going to be constant. You're going to have to be thinking about it. You can have some core principles, right? Get curious before you get furious, but you're still going to have to be willing to flex and, depending on the situation, know how you need to respond in the moment. So definitely something I'm still thinking on and working through, and will be for a little while now, because I think it's such a big topic of how you craft that identity and then how you show up. Because that's ultimately what matters. You can say you're one thing, but how you show up is your true identity. So I guess that'd be the last point, is like, make sure you're aware of that. The identity that you want to focus on is the perception, and see how closely that maps to what you want it to be. Because a lot of times the perception and reality gap is pretty large for a lot of leaders, and they think they're doing really great, but the reality is their employees are like, can this guy just leave already? Like, I can't deal with him anymore.
Let's talk about empathy for a little bit, Dr. Rick. What is your definition of empathy, and how did you learn it?
Yeah. So I think empathy is understanding the emotions of others. And then the second part is key, being willing to alter your emotions to respond to their emotions. I don't think there's any empathy happening if you're not altering your response, right? You're not in that person's shoes, because if you were feeling what they would feeling, you would have a similar response that they have. I think that happens a lot. I'd say, honestly, the thing that actually really opened my eyes to it was Chris Wong, who I know is sort of a mutual connection between the two of us. It was actually him, I believe, who got me on. So shout out to him and his episode. He showed me this video called "It's Not the Nail." And it's basically a husband and wife, and the wife has a nail in her forehead, and she's like, I have a headache. I'm not feeling good. And he's like, well, maybe it's the nail. And she's like, no, it's not the nail. And it's just, an analogy for, like, sometimes, yes, the problem is the problem, but the person you're talking to isn't looking to solve the problem. They're looking for an emotional connection. They're looking for someone to say, I understand and I feel that. I'm not going to try and solve the problem for you. I'm going to be in the same emotion as you are. So we're together. We're both feeling this emotion, and that's how I can support you right now. So maybe my natural instinct is to say, hey, how do we fix this, right? I want to solve the problem. Okay. Well, I'm not being empathetic if the person I'm interacting with isn't in the mood to solve the problem now. And that happens with employees all the time. One of my favorite things to say is, do you need me to help you with this, or are you just venting? Yes. I have employees that come in and they're like, I need to tell you about this. And they go on this 10-minute rant. And I'm like, I hear you. Do you need me to help? Do you need me to talk to someone? Do you just need me to listen? And most of the time, they're like, I just had to get it out. So I didn't say something, and, because they need to regulate their emotions. And if you bottle it up, they interact with that person and they say an offhand comment, or, they're passive aggressive. And it's like, if I get this out, then I won't do that. So as a boss, you have to be, hey, that's what they need. So I have to alter my reactions. Maybe I'm not the type of boss that likes to complain. Maybe I'm a boss that's like, I don't want to hear venting. Complaining's not useful. I used to have a leader tell me complaining is like vomiting. Yeah. It only makes you feel better, and no one wants to be around you when you're doing it. So disclaimer if it's a little graphic, but I heard that and I was like, that is so true a lot of times, right? That was my mindset. Like, you complaining to me, I don't need to hear it. But then, I started learning more. I watched that video, talked to Chris, who's a fantastic resource for that type of stuff. And you start to think more, and you're like, you know what? Empathy is about being able to alter your emotions and be with that person. And yes, there are times where you will, as a leader, have to say, hey, the time for the emotions over. Like, we have to go act. We have to get this job done. I'm going to be here to support you. I know it's going to be tough, but we do have to move forward and solve the problem. You can still be empathetic and realize that they're struggling right now. But yeah, it's been definitely the last 12 months. I've tried to put more stock in that, and just, what is the emotion that I need to have to help this person? And how can I regulate myself to give them that emotion? How can I put other things out of the way to be present for them as a leader in the way that they actually need me to be present right then?
I love that. And I heard that, I don't even remember when, as far as asking the question, the direct question, what do you need from me right now? Mm-hmm. Because for the most part, I feel like you just guessed. Mm-hmm. Or you assumed, or you felt like this what I'm gonna give you. Mm-hmm. So asking that question is so important. What do you need from me right now? Do you need me to be a sounding board? Do you need me to try and help fix the problem? Do you need me to call some people in, like, what do you need from me? And that just, it helps so much. It
Mm-hmm.
helps so much on the macro and the micro. It just helps so much with that. So Dr. Rick, you were in the Marines for 4 years. What do you think is the biggest difference, or maybe the biggest shock that came when it came to emotional intelligence and empathy with the Marines versus civilians?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I was saying a little bit earlier, that just in the Marine Corps, we have a saying called embrace the suck. It means exactly what you think. Like, there are sometimes you're in situations, you're, out on some sort of field operation, some sort of, mission training, and it's pouring down rain, and you're just standing in the rain, and you're not going to get out of the pouring down rain for hours. And you're just like, embrace the suck. That mindset, that doesn't translate in the civilian world, right? What is all the pop psychology everyone's telling you, right? Like, you don't have to deal with things that are harmful to you, that are harmful to your growth. And people aren't willing to embrace the suck, nor should they. I'm not advocating that people need to toughen up. There are certainly there's resilience. There are certain times where you do need to have some grit, but it's not all those times. And a lot of times that's what happens in the corporate world is, hey, we need to return to office. And it's like, well, what are the reasons why? Where the Marine Corps attitude would be embrace the suck. It's just the job. That's what they told you to do. But it's like, no, employees want to understand why. And I've found that if you can give a logical reason, they will accept it. They understand it. They say, okay, that makes sense, right? You have to be in the office because you work a machine that's in the office. Okay, I get that. That makes sense. Why do you want me in the office? I want you in the office because we need to build morale. How does being in the office build morale? Like, you haven't built a connection there yet. So your reason isn't good enough. So that's what I have found, is that the civilian world, like, employees are smart. People are smart. They're not going to put up with it. That's not how it works anymore. And you have to be willing to meet them where they're at, right? Childcare. It's like, they're going to find a job that allows them to show up 10 minutes late when it's school time for bus drop off, and they stay 10 minutes later, right? It's like, what kind of policy punishes an employee for that if they're willing to work later hours? And there are just a lot of things where I think organizations also need to learn this lesson of, employees don't just want to brunt it. They're just not going to sit there and say, oh, I'll just take it. They're going to go somewhere else, because there are a lot of good companies that realize, hey, you have to take care of your employees. You have to treat them right. So the Marine Corps, they don't need to figure it out. Like I said, you're stuck there. You sign the contract. You're in the Marine Corps for 4 years. So you have to learn in the civilian world. Employees and people are your most important asset. That has to be the truth. It can't just be something you say. You have to actually show them that every day.
Why do you think empathy is misconstrued as weakness?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to identity, a lot of times people think it forces them to behave differently. They're like, this is how I would lead. This is my natural instinct. And you want me to tone it down. You want me to water it down. You want me to be something I'm not. And that's where it's like, that's actually what you need to be. I think people just get that misconception because the world we live in, people are much more excited to argue with someone and try and make their case and make their point. And people see, showing empathy as you're capitulating, or you're just laying down and saying, okay, me being empathetic to my employee because they're going through a tough time doesn't mean that I'm not holding them accountable. It means that I'm going to give them a lighter week, but the accountabilities are eventually going to pick back to normal. It just means that I'm being a human being. And I think people see that as, well, I can get taken advantage of, right? My employee's always going to come to me and cry, and they're going to take advantage of me if I show them I'm empathetic, and I'll give them a day off if, something happens. And it's like, that's not the case. Again, it goes back to, what's your default? Do you trust your employees? Do you assume best intent, or do you not? If my employee says, hey, I'm sick, you're sick. If my employee says, hey, I have a flat tire, I don't need a picture of the flat tire. I just don't. I assume you're telling the truth. Yes. Again, like that's the default. And I think that leaders can do a better job of understanding that it's about building connections. It's not about weakness. Your employees will actually see you as a stronger leader when you look at them in a case-by-case basis and say, yes, you can do that. Because they're like, you know what? This person's willing to listen to me. I respect them. They're not just, following the policy. They're actually thinking as a human being. And that's what I always encourage leaders to do, is just treat other people like people, right? If you had a lunch date scheduled with someone and they said, hey, I have to cancel for this reason, what are you going to do? You're going to say, okay, let's reschedule it, right? No big deal. It's okay. It happens. But at work, it's all of a sudden the first instinct, what are they trying to get out of? They're trying to, get by
You're
the
right.
system. They don't want to work. And it's like, no, it's just life. Just treat people like adults. Pretend, it's your friend. And it works so much better when you're just trying to have a human connection with someone, and you actually can build respect. That's what people do. If you think about the people you respect in your life, it's not the hard charging rah leader that's always slamming their fist down. It's someone that connects with you, that listens to you, that helps you grow, that understands you. You respect them because they care about you. And that's, as a leader, if you show care and trust, you build respect much better. So yeah, I definitely agree that empathy as a weakness, that's kind of out there, but it's not the case. It builds trust. It really does help you understand your employees, and they see that, and that's what they're looking for, right? We all just want to be understood. That's what it boils down to. And if you can help understand your employees, they will respect you and they will trust you. They won't take advantage of you.
Let's talk about high pressure situations, Dr. Rick, when it comes to emotional intelligence and empathy, because, the tips and the tools are amazing when everyone is happy and work is going well, but if work is not going well, if people are not happy, if people are arguing or fussing or screaming at the top of their lungs, if the forklift breaks during busy season, how does empathy and emotional intelligence help during that time, during the high pressure, high stakes time?
Yeah, this is definitely something I still struggle with, right? In those situations, you tend to just go to your default because that's what your body's comfortable with, right? If we go back to, all the neurochemistry, the science, it's like, hey, fight or flight, if your body's in stress, it's gonna go back to that muscle memory, which is why in the military, we always trained under stress. So it's like muscle memory. You're just gonna do it. You constantly repeat. And can be a challenge because your body doesn't stop to think. Normally your body says, hey, let's think about this. Let's make a logical decision. That's not how it works under stress. Your body says, hey, we need to act. What do we know to do? And that's where I find myself struggling the most. So it helps if you have a trigger, because that's when you need to pause. That's when you need to say, hey, how do I want to respond in this situation? There was a situation earlier in June. We were hosting a leadership event in the Bahamas for our company, and we're there. We get there and a package didn't arrive through customs. It's very difficult to get stuff that you need for an event from the US to another country. Learned that the hard way. So we have a box stuck in customs. The event starts in 6 hours, and people were really freaking out. People were being upset. Threats were being thrown around. They owe us money back. This is ridiculous. And it's like, okay, we're very frustrated. We're very angry. Let's take a step back. And at the end of the day, we didn't need those materials. I was like, look, it's going to be maybe a 1% worse experience if we don't have the materials we missed. We have 90% of it. It's not a big deal. And the best news is no one knows we were supposed to have it except for us. So It's going to be fine. And I realized in that moment that was the best decision, but people were already on the phone yelling at customs. People were talking to vendors, yelling at vendors. And again, nothing good came out of that, but that was the immediate response of that, hammer down leader. I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to call and yell at somebody. They're going to hear my complaints and solve the problem. It's the same thing when you're yelling at someone on Amazon's customer service. They have nothing to do with your problem. They didn't cause any of it.
Correct.
And you yelling at them does absolutely nothing, right? Yelling at the checkout clerk. The coupon won't scan. They have nothing to do with the system that scans the coupon. So I think that's when people really need to take a step back and say, hey, how do I want to respond? What is this situation? Because we all do it when we're angry, right? We've all said something to a service worker when we don't get the service we think we should. We've all done things. And that's the thing that I've tried to be more mindful of, is what's that trigger? And I've noticed it now. I start to get angry and I talk really fast and I get heated. And it's like, okay, that's the trigger. Take a step back, relax. This person you're yelling at isn't at fault. Even if they were at fault, yelling never solves any problems. It never does anything good. So You attract more bees with honey rather than vinegar. So I just, I try to notice those triggers, but it is the most important in those instances when stress is high, and it's also the hardest to monitor. So it's something I still struggle with, but it's so important because it helps you from making those mistakes where you're like, I really wish I didn't say that, or that apology where you're like, I'm sorry. It's like you could have avoided that whole situation. And if it's in the workplace, you only have so many apologies before the person says, I'm done.
It's true.
You don't get to keep abusing me anymore. An apology doesn't take off what you just said to me. So that's always my thoughts is like, you have to be able to identify the trigger and act on it. Otherwise it's gonna boil over. It's gonna go out of control.
How did being in the military, I'm trying to think of how to ask this question. Okay. How did the military shape your view of masculinity and emotions?
Yeah. I think that's similar. Like I leaned into it. There's that obviously in the military, especially in the Marine Corps infantry, there's that like alpha male stereotype. You work out every morning, who can run the furthest with the most weight on, who can lift the most weight, all that stuff. It's very much present, right? We would do wrestling and grappling competitions. And at the end of the day, it is that sort of alpha male culture. And what you start to realize is that is, again, very pigeonholing into an identity of I have a hammer and that's the only thing I can do to solve the problem. And at the end of the day, when it comes to masculinity, there's so many more aspects of that. Obviously, being healthy is an important aspect of overall health. But when it comes to masculinity, it's about how I think you support other people in your role as a male. So how you're willing to support females in their role, right? That shows a sort of confidence, right? People that are a little bit, the people that aren't confident in their masculinity are going to try and project that sort of alpha male persona because they're insecure about it. Someone that isn't insecure about it is going to just realize that being a male is a piece of the identity. And that means it's my job to support people in that role. It's not to exacerbate stereotypes. It's to say, hey, as a male, there's place. But for me, I did struggle getting out because I tried to lean more into that like alpha male mentality. And at the end of the day, that's not the image that you want to project, especially in the workplace. A lot of times I didn't want to be that command and control leader. I had worked with a lot of them. I wanted to be more well-rounded, and I wanted to focus on me as a whole person, not just me as a quote unquote alpha male, but me as like a person in society. And at the end of the day, that means you have to be a more well-rounded individual. And that kind of shapes, I think, masculinity. There are many facets of it, and alpha male is just one piece of it. It's not everything. But it's definitely something that I haven't thought as much about. Because like I said, I tried to distance myself from that a little bit, but definitely it has me thinking. So I'm going to be thinking about this more. I like that question.
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. To follow up on that same question, do you, and this is me assuming that you do, and I could be assuming wrong, do you receive pushback from men and male leaders when you talk about emotions and empathy and self-awareness and emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I think the biggest pushback you get is I got that covered. I'm good. The false confidence. That's what you always see. They're like, I know what emotional intelligence is. What's emotional intelligence? It's reading the room. And it's like, okay, what else is there? Oh, that's it. Knowing how to act, reading the room. And it's like, okay, I don't think you're understanding this at all. There's no self-awareness piece. And that's where I think people start to get lost. And that's where I get a lot of the pushback is when I start talking about self-awareness, because a lot of people don't want to know, especially those senior leaders. You can be successful without emotional intelligence, unfortunately.
We do know.
People see it. And usually those leaders become toxic and they do end up leaving an organization. But I think that there's a a misconception about what it takes to become a senior leader, about that just ruthlessness, because that's what so many people preach. They're like, you have to be ruthless. No one cares about your career as much as you. You have to just go out there. And it's hard to talk to leaders and get them really bought into seeing those blind spots. Like I said, the biggest pushback comes because they think they know it, and then they don't want to dive into self-awareness. One thing we've really pushed is leaning into like assessments, whether it be behavioral assessments or EQ assessments, just trying to give them a snapshot. One thing that was also successful, 360 reviews. I found that if you put the 360 feedback in front of a senior leader and they say, well, that's not true, there's no denying it. It's like, these are the people that report to you, that this is their perception. If you don't agree with it, you have to do something to change it. That's the only success we've had. A lot of people get upset because they say emotional intelligence is a buzzword and all that stuff. And it's like, it really is a differentiator. And the emotionally intelligent leaders, you can see it, you can feel it. People want to be around them. They want to be on their team. They don't get talked down to. They get corrective feedback without feeling like, someone's condescending them.
Right.
People just want to work for those leaders. So I definitely do get the pushback, but I think the people that push back, they know they're just kind of insecure and they don't want to open that can of worms. They're like, I don't want to talk about this because I know I yell at people, but I'm a vice president, so I'm going to keep yelling at people. And you see that a lot in the corporate world. So hopefully we can change that. That's definitely something I try and do, is help leaders see that there are better systems and you can create an environment where your employees do things autonomously and you don't really have to do a lot. You're there to support, but your employees are just doing. I think that's the ultimate goal of leadership, is where you're like, if I was not here, everything would be the same. Nothing would change without me. And if you're not at that point, then you probably need to reassess things and say, hey, how can I be a better leader? Because my employees shouldn't rely on me constantly asking questions. They shouldn't be there to stroke my ego. I should be there to support them. So definitely a challenge, but yeah, you're always going to get pushback from people that don't want to look in the mirror when it comes to emotional intelligence.
And, I did ask that question from a male lens, but I can easily ask that question from a female lens too, because, women have the same issue. VP, I know I yell at people, but I'm going to keep yelling at people because I'm a vice president, or, I'm the president. I know, they don't like it when I do this, but I'm going to still do it. So women, have the same issues and challenges as men, especially when it comes to emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So have you suffered or sacrificed anything because of your learning and implementing of emotional intelligence?
I definitely think that there are some things that you do sacrifice. Me particularly, if you want to be more that empathetic leader, if you want to be more of someone who puts your employees first, I think in the long run it will work out. But in the short term, you're definitely going to get sort of less recognition yourself personally. I think that happens a lot of time on teams, right? The most emotionally intelligent person, the person who's the glue on that team, very rarely gets recognized. They're kind of quietly there. They're helping the person who's down, not engaged in the group while everyone else is talking. They're bringing people back in, but they kind of go unnoticed because they're just there trying to make sure everyone else is becoming better. And I think that's what sometimes you sacrifice. Again, in the long run, it works out. People do remember, people do know. But if you're focused on more about your team, if you're focused on, hey, how can I alter my style, shift my style, give my team more autonomy, I'm going to let my team take risks, I'm going to take the blame, you're definitely putting yourself in a situation where you may get less praise. You may go unnoticed a little bit more. Again, if you're really in it for the right reasons, that doesn't bother you. Before, my ego would have been hurt by that. Now I think it's a good thing that my employees get called out and I don't. I think if I get called out and they don't, I think that kind of looks bad. So you don't mind that, but it certainly does happen. And you'll see in the organization people that are louder, that are more charismatic, that, bark orders. A lot of times they do get rewarded for that. It doesn't mean that it's the right move. It just means that a lot of organizations don't know how to view leadership effectively. They don't know how to differentiate long-term sustainable employee experience with short-term profit and growth, and their bonuses are tied to it. So those senior leaders are always going to be focused on the short term. I've made the decision where it's like, I'm focused on the long term of cultivating people and helping them grow. And that may mean some of my successes may be dimmed as a result of it, but I know the impact that I have, and I'm multiplying that impact across the organization. So it may not be me as the top performer getting all the praise anymore, but it is me having an impact, and I'm comfortable not sort of getting all that praise that you get when you're that like high top performer.
So, Dr. Rick, as we get ready to wrap up, my final question for you: what is your intention in this space in teaching and training about emotional intelligence? What's your goal?
Yeah, I really want to help organizations and senior leaders build trust, primarily through building better leadership systems and structures. At the end of the day, you can have the best, most emotionally intelligent leader in the world, but if they're put in a company that has policies that breed mistrust, if they're put in a company that doesn't give them the authority to go out and lead, doesn't give them clear accountabilities, they're not going to be successful. It doesn't matter how good they are. It's just like, to use a sports analogy, the NFL. It doesn't matter, how good the players are if the coach is poor, or if the general manager is not good, the culture's bad. It doesn't matter how good individual talent is. And that's what I hope I can do, is help leaders see that their job is to build an environment and build the conditions so their employees can just go do, right? Just let them go cook, right? Just go. And if you build that environment, leadership is, people put a lot of stock in it. As someone who studies leadership's career in leadership, I probably shouldn't say that leadership's overrated, but it really is more in organizations. It's the system. How well you've built your organization and its structure is going to determine how successful your leaders are. If they have the authority to hire people, if they have the authority to fire people, if you put parameters in place, all of that stuff dictates their success. So I try to focus on that, and I'm hoping that I can help organizations and help senior leaders build those conditions, because frontline employees have been taken advantage of, they haven't been treated properly, and that changes at the top. And there is a better way to do it. You can build trust, you can be highly profitable. It's just about how you design those systems. So that's where my passion lies, is figuring out what those systems are and how you instill it so employees actually enjoy coming to work. You should be enthusiastic going into work each day. If you're not, I hope you can find a role that makes you enthusiastic, because that can be the case. Most of the time it happens when you have a good boss, you trust your boss, you trust your organization, you have clarity, you're not going to get terminated tomorrow. That's how you build a good, sustainable business. And then you can have, 10, 20-year employees. All of a sudden recruiting costs go down and you're like, wow, we really did do a lot. But it starts with building those systems. So that's what I'm really passionate about.
As you were speaking, Dr. Rick, I remember someone said, or maybe I read it on social media, you will know a lot about your culture at your company and your leadership style based off how your employees feel about going to work on Sunday nights.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I 100% agree.
Yes. Well, Dr. Rick, you have been amazing. Thank you. This is awesome. Much for being on this podcast. And I love the fact that you are able to bring both perspectives, the civilian perspective when it comes to emotional intelligence, as well as the military, the Marine perspective when it comes to emotions and empathy. So, and that's something new to the podcast. I've never been able to have that discussion. So awesome. I'm glad I was able to have it with you.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on. This was great.
Absolutely. And to my community, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. You can get Dr. Rick's podcast on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.